Welcome to Richplanet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. Now, a few years ago I did a program which covered the work of Stan Myers, and I showed some electronic circuits that I'd developed in order to try and repeat some of his inventions. Stan Myers was an inventor who invented things in the 1980s. In the 1990s, he was American. Now, in the mid-90s, the American military showed interest in some of Stan Myers' work, and they tried to secretize some of his technology. And then in 1997, he died in very mysterious circumstances. He came out of a restaurant, said he'd been poisoned, and he dropped down dead. So there's a lot of people think that Stan Myers' technology really did work. Now, let's just explain briefly what he is alleged to have invented. The thing that he's most noted for is the water fuel cell. So this is a container of water with metal tubes in it. Electricity is pulsed across the tubes. Hydrogen and oxygen are then generated. That hydrogen and oxygen can then be used to power a car or any other sort of engine. Now, the thing about the Myers fuel cell is that it was alleged that it broke the law of conservation of energy. So in other words, the amount of electrical energy to create the hydrogen and oxygen was less than the amount of energy when the hydrogen and oxygen is burnt off. Now, most scientists would immediately dismiss that such a device could work without even looking at it. Now, I don't belong to any company, I don't belong to any organization, I don't work for the government, and what that means is that I can look at inventions such as the Stan Myers water fuel cell and investigate them without being ridiculed, without having any pressure or peer pressure for someone saying, "Oh, why are you looking at that? It's obviously a fake." I'm not arrogant enough to say, well, that can't possibly work because it breaks the law of conservation of energy. But at the same time, I'm not ignorant enough to say, oh, well, that must work because he was poisoned in a restaurant. Further investigation is required. I believe the only way you can find out if there's any truth about this device is to try and build one yourself, and that's what I've been trying to do. Essentially, Myers took his water fuel cell and he incorporated it into a motor vehicle, so he's driving around America in a car, a buggy, that's powered by water. A car powered by water. Imagine the ramifications to the planet if you can produce a car that you could just fill up at your local reservoir. Think about it, right? Now, and think about why Stan Myers may have been murdered. Now, before I go through the Myers design and what I've tried to replicate, let's just look at this law of conservation of energy, because this is where physicists and engineers get upset if the device appears to be breaking the law of conservation of energy. They don't like it. But I think it's possible to modify that law and keep everyone happy. Let's have a look at the law. Yes. Okay, so the law of conservation of energy in physics states that the total energy of an isolated system cannot change. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Right? So you can't get energy from nowhere, in other words. Now, if the Myers device does work, and if other devices which are alleged to break that law work, such as the Bedini motor, Adam Trombley's homopolar generator, Bruce De Palma's N machine, various other devices that allegedly break this law, I would modify the law. And this is how I would do it. So I'll quote the law again. The total energy of an isolated system cannot change. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Fine. This is how I would change it. The total energy of an isolated system which does not exchange energy from the quantum vacuum cannot change. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Because these devices, this is what they're allegedly doing. They're tapping into energy from the vacuum, from space itself. They're not getting their energy from matter, from atoms. They're getting it from the fabric of space itself. So this is an energy exchange which isn't in our physics textbooks, but possibly can be achieved. Energy can be extracted from the fabric of space, and if it is being extracted from the fabric of space, then it will appear to come from nowhere. Now, a bit later I will give you my hypothesis as to where I think that energy is coming from. But let's just look first at what Stan Myers did. There's a lot of stuff on the internet, there's forums, there's a lot of people on the internet who've built devices like the one I've built here, who've probably got further than I have. But the problem is, it's very difficult to verify people's claims unless you go meet them and you measure their kit with your own test equipment. But there are people who have achieved some of what Stan Myers done with regards over unity, they call it. This is an over unity device. But I don't know whether it works, and I don't know whether I don't know. But you're not going to find out unless you build one, are you? So this is what I'm trying to do. So now there are several variations on the Myers device. Some of them are mains powered, some of them are powered by 12 volts DC, others use a car alternator to provide the electricity for the pulses. So there's various different configurations. Now, we do have a few problems with Stan Myers. The first is that he was not, let's say, classically trained in electronics. He was self-taught. So when you look at his circuits and you look at his circuit diagrams, you realize that they're not drawn like you would maybe learn if you went to a university, right? Which makes them difficult to follow. He doesn't provide detailed parts lists, and he doesn't provide proper ISO standard engineering drawings that you could easily follow and you could actually build your own device. So they're more sort of schematics. Here's a classic example of a Myers schematic. All right, it's not really telling you exactly which component from RS you need to buy and connect to what. So that's the first problem. His designs aren't 100% specific. The second problem is that when he obtained his patents, and he has got patents for this technology, the patent office had to issue him with the patents because he demonstrated that his over unity device was producing, or his water fuel cell was producing vast quantities of hydrogen and oxygen. Now, but Myers himself said that once he submitted the actual description of his device, he changed certain parts of it, or he omitted certain important parts so that you couldn't build it from the information in the patent, and he did that deliberately to protect his invention. But we will go on what there is available and then maybe try and modify what we've got in order to try and hunt for this secret part of his design. Alright, so what did Stan Myers do? Let's just explain. The water fuel cell houses half a dozen tubes. Now these tubes consist of actually of two tubes. You've got a stainless steel tube, right, which is, the wall is about 1.5 millimeters thick, and then you put another stainless steel tube inside it. Now these ones that have, well actually Dave Worsdale did these for me, you can see they've got plastic pips there on them, because we've got holes drilled, 3 holes drilled around the circumference. So I'll just put that last pip in there. You can see that slots in, and then they act as spacers, so you can put the one tube inside the other, and that should sit nice and snug. And push that in there. So we've got one tube inside the other, so we've got a gap of about, it's actually 1.5 millimeters, and I'm going to come on to that gap in a minute. So we've got 2 stainless steel tubes, one inside the other. That then goes inside water. I'm using distilled water, which is another variable in all of this, the type of water. So you've got 6 tubes identical to this, and these are electrodes. We then apply pulsed electricity across these 2 electrodes through 2 particular coils. And then hydrogen oxygen then bubbles off and then can be collected and used to power an engine or what have you. That's the principle of the Myers device. So you've got several variables here. You've got the circuit itself that produces the high voltage pulses. You've got the tubes, so you can modify the gap in the tubes. You've got the type of water that you use. But I think the important thing is the electronics, which we're going to look at now. And that is the circuit that I've built here is based on the Myers 8XA circuit. If you want to look up that on the internet. So what we've got mains voltage coming in. We've got a variable transformer so that the 240 voltage coming in can be turned from 0 up to 240. That voltage is then just put through a basic rectifier, so we get rectified voltage coming out. That is then fed through a thyristor, so it's switching it very, very fast through a blocking diode, which again allows electricity to just flow in one direction. That then goes through 2 induction coils. Now we've got these here. Now they're wound rather differently to a normal coil. It's a bifilar winding, which means that there's actually 2 windings on the same core. So your pulsed DC comes out of the voltage intensifier circuit. It goes through the coil, across the electrodes, and then it comes back and it goes through the coil again. So you've effectively got 2 coils either side of your capacitor or your water cell, because electrically this is effectively a capacitor. So you've got an inductor either side of it with pulsed DC voltage going onto it. And according to Myers, it's the fact that you've got these 2 inductors either side of the cell which is important. He talks about resonance. Now I'm dubious as to whether there's any resonance in this, but I think it's more of what I would describe as a pumping circuit, because you're getting pulsed DC, and each pulse raises the voltage each time, and then what happens at some point when the voltage gets to a particular level across the plates, the water cracks and creates hydrogen and oxygen.